so I'm doing something new for this LP. See, I own so many fantasy and science fiction books and movies and TV shows that I could do this whole thing without having to buy anything new. It's crazy. So what I've done is let my patrons request a Bobbin's Choice, where I choose something that may or may not be portal related, but is what I consider a very good speculative fiction work. I bring this up because patron Kronish has requested a Bobbin's Choice, and so today I'll be taking a look at one of my all-time favorite books, Firebird by Mercedes Lackey. About the author. Mercedes Lackey is a prolific author of fantasy novels who was born in Chicago in 1950. She had a fairly ordinary childhood, at least by her reckoning, and she first got into science fiction and fantasy thanks to James H. Schmitz and Andre Norton, the latter of whom was a woman author who wrote under masculine pen names. Norton was also one of the Grey Golden Age authors, but I'm getting off topic. Lackey graduated from Purdue University in 1972. During her time at college, she discovered some fellow science fiction fans and started submitting some of her own works to what are called fanzines, amateur magazines that would publish fan fiction and original stories that, for whatever reason, aren't picked up by a professional magazine. She also started writing science fiction folk music. From there, she transitioned to writing fantasy stories, and that became her genre of choice by the time she started submitting her stories to the professionals. Before she became a professional author, Lackey worked in computer programming with American Airlines, moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma in the process. These days, she lives with her husband just outside of town, and sometimes helps rehabilitate raptors, which is to say birds of prey, not human-sized dinosaurs. Lackey's most famous book series would have to be the Valdemar universe. The books center on a kingdom called Valdemar and the uniquely intelligent horses they call companions. Each companion chooses a human, thenceforth called a herald, and through their connection, the herald gains certain magical abilities. Now, as you can probably guess, the books are primarily aimed at girls in their horses are amazing phase, but thanks to Lackey's experience living in a rural area and interacting with actual farm animals, her books are a lot more grounded in reality than they have to be. If you're curious about the Valdemar universe, but you're a grown-ass man such as myself, I'd recommend starting with the books Exile's Honor and Exile's Valor, which also happen to be about a grown-ass man who doesn't really get this whole magical horses stuff at first. And if that doesn't apply to you, then the Eros trilogy is a good place to start, since that's the first Valdemar trilogy Lackey wrote. Mercedes Lackey has also written a lot of books outside of the Valdemar universe, including a collaboration with Andre Norton called The Half-Blood Chronicles. More than a few of her novels are mature adaptations of fairy tales, and while most of them take place in a setting called the 500 Kingdoms, today's book, Firebird, is a standalone story, published in 1996 that takes place in its own setting. Firebird has two primary influences: the ballet The Firebird by Igor Stravinsky, and the Brothers Grimm story, The Golden Bird. That being said, Firebird is a fairly thick novel, and it doesn't shy away from involving other mythical Russian creatures and characters. Pretty much the only big one who doesn't show up is old Baba Yaga. Why am I telling you this? I should be telling you the story. Ilya Ivanovich is the son of Tsar Ivan, a man who is not as great as the Great Tsar, but who has more land than any of his boyar neighbors. He also has the unique fortune of having 8 adult children, all sons. And while some Tsars would use his sons to create a powerful army, Tsar Ivan is so paranoid that he has refused to name an inheritor and encourages his sons to fight each other for his favor. As a result, most of them have grown up to be malicious, backstabbing thugs. Most of them. Ilya is the exception, probably because he was the only son of Ivan's second wife, or possibly because he grew up under the tutelage of 3 exceptional people: the supremely competent Mother Galina, head of the palace dairy, the Orthodox priest, Father Mikhail, and the Slavic shaman, Ruslan. Ruslan and Mikhail have formed an odd alliance. Ivan hates both religions, and pretty much anything that isn't money or land, but he can't get rid of either of them without pissing someone off, and so he ignores them instead. Between the three of them, Ivan learns how to be a good person, he learns how to read, and he learns all about the Orthodox saints and Slavic spirits, like the Bannock and the Domovoi. His brothers soon realize that Ilya is growing up smarter than them, and so he also learns how to fight, and how to sneak around the palace, so that his brothers won't beat him up. After that, though, they start ganging up on him, and the beatings slowly grow more serious. Ivan sees this happening, but he turns a blind eye because one less son would mean one less person plotting his own demise, at least as he sees it. Ilya sees it differently, though, because he would gladly run away from this toxic family if he thought he could actually get away without getting caught. After a few chapters to introduce everyone, the plot begins on the night Ilya spends with a particularly fetching dairymaid. During the night, someone managed to slip into Ivan's private cherry orchard, past sleeping guards, and take all the ripe cherries right off the trees. Ivan is particularly fond of cherries, you see, and so he has a guarded grove of rare late-fruiting cherry trees. Now, the cherries aren't worth much, but the theft means that someone is spitting in Ivan's face. So, as the thefts continue night after night, and the guards fall asleep every single time, Ivan gets angrier and angrier. Ilya's brothers are convinced he's somehow to blame because maybe he has magic powers since he's so smart, and they give him a particularly thorough beating. Fortunately, though, the thefts continue during Ilya's recuperation, so even Ivan can't suspect him after that. In fact, when Ilya finally becomes well enough to return to the palace dining hall, Ivan makes an announcement. Each of his sons will take turns guarding the cherry trees from oldest to youngest. If any of them manage to catch the thief, that son will become Ivan's heir. Ilya is intrigued by this, not because he wants to become the heir, heaven forbid, but because the thief able to evade Ivan's guards for this long might be able to help him escape. So he sneaks into the cherry grove on the first night, but whatever power makes the guards fall asleep manages to catch him too. On the second night, he returns to the grove, but fills his clothing with pins to keep him awake. This helps him fight off the magical song that puts people to sleep, and he soon comes face to face with the Firebird, a magical creature that is sometimes a bird of fiery wings, sometimes a beautiful maiden with golden hair, and sometimes a bit of both at once. Ilya says nothing of what he saw to anyone, even though he can't stop dreaming about the Firebird. Meanwhile, the second son, Piotr, conspires with the stable hands so that he can insult Ivan to his face and successfully run off. Ilya is jealous, but his other brothers are angry. They beat Ilya to within an inch of his life, leave him in the family crypt to die, and since Ilya has seen the Firebird, he can now see his ancestors' ghosts as they each take turns berating or admonishing him. Fortunately, Mikhail and Ruslan find Ilya before he bleeds out. The two old men are worried for Ilya. His brothers really tried to kill him this time, and they'll try again when he comes out of hiding. So they come up with a plan. Ilya will pretend to be a fool, completely witless, and therefore no danger to either his father or his brothers. He fully adapts to his new role just as winter sets in. And meanwhile, the Firebird rewards his silence by leaving him a magical cherry that lets him understand animals. During the winter, Ilya's brothers play a cruel prank on him by tying his legs to the stirrups of a horse and taking him out on a boar hunt. Fortunately, the horse in question is a descendant of Nightwind, a mythical horse of great intelligence and power. And so the horse only pretends to spook, and the two spend most of the day having a nice walk through the woods. Well, at least until the two come across a wounded boar that gores the horse and runs off. With his last request, the horse asks Ilya to cut off part of his tail hair and make a bracelet. According to him, this should help counter the curse of bad luck that's been affecting Ilya ever since he saw the Firebird. Ilya cuts the hair and starts wandering through the darkening woods. He happens across an unseasonably warm lake and a young woman, but the woman turns out to be a Rusalka, an evil water spirit who drowns the unwary. Ilya escapes with the help of the horse's spirit and in the process he frees a nightingale that the Rusalka was going to eat. The next day, he happens across a hedge maze that's identical to the maze in Ilya's family tomb. This is because the man at the center of the maze is Yasha, a huntmaster who worked for Tsar Ivan's father before he retired. Ilya gets some food, clothing, and equipment from Yasha, and since he has no reason to go back home, he decides to set out and seek his fortune. The first thing Ilya does is free a fox from a fallen log, and then he comes across a maze with impossibly tall stone walls. The nightingale from earlier shows up to lead him through, and as he approaches the center, it once again grows unseasonably warm. At its center, Ilya is astonished to find an immense palace with acres of gardens and orchards surrounding it. Ilya explores the grounds until he comes across a familiar light in an apple orchard. It's the Firebird again. And while Ivan couldn't hold her, the owner of this estate is a powerful and immortal sorcerer called the Katschai. When the Firebird sees Ilya, she lifts her curse and urges him to leave. But Ilya spots a mechanical release on the magical net and uses it to free her. He then grabs the Firebird by the wrists and refuses to let go until she agrees to help him defeat the Katschai. The Firebird has been observing the Katschai for some time, so she explains that he routinely kidnaps the most beautiful women from around the world and keeps them until he tires of them. He never touches them though, because he finds no pleasure in anything but greed. He took out his heart and sealed it in stone, and he put that stone in a diamond, he put that diamond in a duck, he put the duck in a hare, he put the hare in a locked chest, he put the chest on the highest branch of an impossibly tall oak tree, and finally, he set a mechanical dragon to guard the tree. After explaining all of this, the Firebird leaves, but first, she gives Ilya a feather that he can use to summon her by waving it over his head 3 times. Ilya sneaks over to the Maiden's Garden and instantly falls in love with the most beautiful of the 12, Tatiana. Turns out she was the Katschai's first victim. He came to her father's kingdom, killed him, transformed his servants into monsters, and then turned his castle into the magic palace. Ilya swears to rescue her, but then the Katschai shows up. Fortunately, Ilya has been playing a fool for months now, and so he falls into an old routine, and the Katschai decides to make him scrub dishes in the kitchen. Ilya quickly gets out of kitchen duty and spends several weeks scouting out the palace. He befriends the monster gardener, and that lets him find a garden full of the challengers that the Katschai turned into statues. And he discovers the dragon garden with a giant oak tree. And then he gets caught and teleported out of the palace. It's still the dead of winter outside the Katschai's influence, but the warmth of the Firebird's feather keeps Ilya from freezing to death. The fox finds him and leads him back into the labyrinth, and once he recovers, Ilya waves the Firebird feather and calls her over. The Firebird again warns Ilya to abandon his plan, but he says that he can't help but do this for love, even though he knows he shouldn't. Oddly enough, the Firebird says that she knows what he means. The 3 come up with a plan to get the Katschai's heart. Ilya and the fox bug the dragon until the Katschai turns it off in frustration. The Firebird guides Ilya up the tree, and between the 3 of them, they manage to destroy the box, kill the hare and the duck, get the diamond, and then the Katschai's forces dogpile Ilya, and the Firebird runs away. The Katschai doesn't kill Ilya immediately, but that's because he wants to know how Ilya found out about his heart. He has his monsters beat Ilya, but then a bunch of things happen at once. Ilya escapes the monsters, the maidens distract the Katschai, and then Ilya summons the Firebird, who smashes in through the window and sings her song of sleep. The Katschai is able to counter her magic, but she keeps him busy long enough for Ilya to grab the diamond and smash it, killing the Katschai and undoing all of his enchantments. Ilya has become the hero of the kingdom. The statues all come back to life, including Ilya's wayward brother, Piotr, and all of them pledge their loyalty or friendship. Many of them pair off with the maidens, and of course Ilya gets both Tatiana and her kingdom. But this ending isn't as happy as it first sounds. Tatiana, for one, is spoiled rotten thanks to her father and thanks to living with the Katschai. And when Ilya isn't planning a massive 12 weddings at once, he's having to fulfill his fiancée's whims and deal with her tantrums. The magic in his life seems to have gone, and even the animals have stopped speaking to him. And just to cap everything off, Ilya realizes only now that while he was infatuated with Tatiana, he was in love with the Firebird. But then, on the day of the wedding, the fox and the nightingale show back up. They suggest to Ilya that he should go get some big, strong friends and go visit his bride-to-be. So he does so, and Ilya discovers Tatiana and his brother Piotr together in her bed. Ilya is overjoyed that he has an excuse to get the hell out of there, but for appearance's sake he pretends to be outraged as he storms off, orders a horse and some provisions, and gallops off with the fox and the nightingale. Once he's away from the palace, Ilya pulls out the Firebird feather that he always kept under his shirt. The Firebird appears and embraces him, and as the four of them start the journey to the Firebird's mythical palace, the fox says, "And we all lived happily ever after." The analysis. I'm just going to go ahead and admit this. You're probably going to notice a theme among my personal picks, both Portal and otherwise, of works that turn myths and fairy tales on their heads. There's something about that blending of old and new ideas, taking the best thoughts from 100 different sources, that really appeals to me. Old stories stick around for a reason, you know? And it's not just because they closely fit the hero's journey arc. So what do we have in this book? We have a protagonist named after one mythical Russian hero, and his father named after another mythical Russian hero, but their household is so toxic that Ilya's brothers try to murder him, and Ivan only gets mad because they failed. Ilya gains the ability to speak to animals, but for the most part they're about as dumb as they are in real life. Dogs just think in terms of food, petting, and pack dynamics, and they have no sense of time outside of just now and forever. Cats are better able to think for themselves, but they're also very selfish. The Katschai is this monumentally powerful sorcerer, and his life is set up as this ultimate tragedy of power. He sold his soul and encased his heart in stone, so while he's greedy for everything and he has the power to take it, he lacks any ability to enjoy it. And yet he also has some very human weaknesses. He keeps his minions stupid so they can't plot against him, but that makes them easy to fool for someone good at fooling. And even the Katschai falls for Ilya's antics on 2 occasions. He also gets very frustrated when his dragon apparently keeps screaming at nothing, and Ilya takes advantage of his arrogance throughout the story. And then, of course, there's the love story. The signs are all there, all throughout the novel, pointing in the right direction, but it takes Ilya, and possibly the reader, until the end to see the truth. Ilya loves the adventure, not the prize he gets when it ends. Well, it's dangerous, sure, but so is life at home. And with the adventure, Ilya gets the freedom to set his own goals, to be the man he wants to be, to see things he's never seen before, and to do things that no one else has accomplished. The Firebird represents all of that. She lives that life, and unlike Tatiana, she loves him back. And so it's no wonder that she is the one he truly loves. As the two say at the end, the Firebird would rather never fly again than be without Ilya, and Ilya would never ask her to make that choice. This is what I was talking about with Enchanted. Firebird deconstructs the shapes of the old myths, and in this case an old ballet, but it doesn't deconstruct the meanings behind them. This is a book about freedom, about looking past your own nose so that you can see the true beauty of the world. And it's about understanding the true nature of love. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I read through it twice the first time I found it, and I definitely recommend that you read it. Thanks for joining me again for today's book review, and I hope I'll see you next time when we turn around. Look at what you see.